Hello, hello, and welcome to Feminist Futures. Sorry it's been a while, but a lot of back-end stuff I'm trying to figure out, so I'm streaming live now. Woo! Anyway, and I'll also there will be this stream will be saved, and you can go look at it later. But I think it will create a little less work for me on the back end. Maybe we'll see. Technology is great when it works, but when it doesn't, or you try to figure it out, it's a pain in the ass. So we'll see. Well, we're doing it. So today is April 2nd. It's a Thursday, close to the weekend. We have a few things to get through today, but we're actually so. For the theme today, the theme is, as the title says, is organized. So how we can be better organized, create structures that bring about equality, equity, all that good stuff that fight colonialism, imperialism in all its forms. So in that vein, I'm actually going to start with an article here. It's not too long, but I'll read the article to you, and then we'll get into some news. So, one sec. Moving stuff around here. Okay. Goodness. Okay, here we go. My hope is with some practice that this will get a little smoother, hopefully. All right, so anyway, here we go. This is an article from March 24th on the Red Clarion. The Red Clarion is they do a lot of articles and organizing on like communist and socialist type stuff. And I ran across this article the other day, and I think it's a good call to action of like what we should be doing, of like, okay, we go to the marches and rallies, but what happens after that, right? We have election day, but that's only like one day, right? Anyway, so yeah, here we go. Okay, start out with a quote here from Kwame Ture. He says, "We say that we must come to know the difference between mobilization and organization because the enemy will use mobilization to demobilize us. Mobilization is very easy, very, very easy, since we are a people who are instinctively ready to respond against acts of injustice. Anytime there's one little act of injustice, we can blow it up, and we will find people who will come and make some mass demonstration around it." And this is what mobilization does. It mobilizes people around issues. Those of us who are revolutionary are not concerned with issues. We are concerned with the system. The difference must be properly understood. Mobilization usually leads to reform action, not to revolutionary action. We must transform mobilization to organization. We say the enemy will try to use mobilization to demobilize us. Many brothers and sisters who've been to the Million and More March will say to you, "I was there." Well, what are you doing today, my sister? Organizing, not merely mobilizing. We have all heard and seen the mass demonstrations, marches, and walkouts that erupted in the Twin Cities, signaling the start of this year's struggle. We've heard the tramp of 10,000 people marching against the occupation, the sounds of mobilization, but beneath it and lasting beyond, for those who know to listen, is a steadier sound, like whispers, like chants. That of the organizers standing sentry on street corners in the aching cold, coordinating grocery runs, rapid response to raids, and transporting students and workers safely. These bands are built by grassroots organizing, and is precisely the last lesson our enemies want us to learn. 5 years ago, Minneapolis erupted in response to the murder of George Floyd. For that summer, it seemed every city in the world became an uprising as Democrats scrambled to take a knee and corporations writhed to retire racist brand mascots and grant better media representation. USU, which is it's kind of like the editorial board of this website. USU spoke with the communists on the ground in Minneapolis who has witnessed the sweep of 2020 to the present moment. Quote, during this period, it felt like people were taking power in a way that'd be much bigger, unquote, they told us. Quote, living in South Minneapolis, a police precinct being lit and set on fire, grocery stores looted and turned into mutual aid sites, 200 buildings going up in flames. That was a lot happening in that short period of time. It felt more than a moment, but it quickly went away, unquote. All the energy to abolish the police or even defund them was funneled by liberal counterinsurgents into tactics that either wasted the time of great masses of the oppressed or narrowly appealed to the upper classes of the nationally oppressed through job prospects and investment opportunity. The moment that was 2020 evaporated into an utter defeat for the oppressed and a complete victory for the settler colonial ruling class that ensures daily the death of a countless unarmed Floyds. The only price paid, a handful of temporary concessions. This current regime has already pried back with vengeance and a single sacrificial pig. As our comrade in Minneapolis said, quote, as communists, we were not organized enough to win the masses over when they were ripe to be captured, unquote. It is the general consensus of principled communists that this was a watershed moment wasted. Every failure is a lesson, data in the experiment of social revolution. But if no one is keeping track, if no one is recording the results and learning from past efforts, the movement might as well be hurling human lives at the wall to see what sticks and looking away at each impact. But as it turns out, something has stuck. Something has lodged itself firmly in the communities of Minneapolis that all resulting efforts to resist occupation have been able to grow from. Organizations. Persisting from the embers of 2020 to now, it's our responsibility to learn from them. In Minneapolis, there was a massive wave of homelessness at the beginning of COVID. Networks of mutual aid popped up because of that. Then the uprising happened and people started figuring out how to take care of each other, figuring out food, how to handle work. Those networks were built by organizers, and after the mobilized masses disappeared in 2020, these networks remained. The remarkable pace at which these networks expanded from the handful of organizations to the intersecting community webs connecting every single city section, neighborhood, and block proves the lesson that Kwame Ture described so perfectly more than half a century ago. It also shows all of us empire-wide a roadmap for how to prepare as these occupations escalate. Every city in this land is a garrison fort. Palisades replaced by cameras, automatic alarms, and barbed wire. So to call any concentration by the federal government in occupation is essentially a misnomer. It is merely a reinforcement. It is a concentration of already existing state repressive powers, but we must not ignore the difference in form. The organizers in Minneapolis have adjusted to the reality of their new opponents. All law enforcement in this country can and will kill you. We know that. They're parts of the same arm in this imperialist state. However, what has become clear with these federal agents is that they do not function on the same playing field as a local PD. They do not operate on the same playing field as the National Guard. I don't know if it's a martyr complex or just talking shit, but I see this tendency from people who don't live here when they say, stop filming and go de-arrest, or I wouldn't let this happen. I'll tell you, you would let it happen or you'll get killed. De-arrest is more common in anarchist circles. Anarchists here are not calling for de-arrest anymore. that I've seen, because it's understood in the city that we don't stand any chance. You can de-arrest with the local PD, not with ICE, because there's a 50-50 chance they'll kill you and the person they're trying to kidnap. In the end, you still won't stop who they're trying to kidnap. The organizers in Minneapolis understand fundamentally the dialectic between theory and practice. They have gathered experimental data from their lives, developed practices, tried and applied this theory, analyzed the results, and developed new theory and new practices. They are at the forefront of the fight against the bourgeoisie government. The four opportunists and the spontaneous movement. As the press organ of the All-Empire Workers' League, we have already taken a stand against the four opportunists, those quote-unquote organizations that capture revolutionary and radical energy, sweep up developing communists and the newly class conscious, and then negate them by combining them with liberals, by denying them access to the levers of power in their own organizations, by teaching them bad theory, and by burning up their energy through endless mobilization with no strategic goals. The four opportunists are the CPUSA, Communist Party USA, the PSL, the FRSO, and the DSA. In Minneapolis, the growth of the spontaneous movement has continued in the face of the four opportunists, specifically the FRSO and the DSA. USU has had contact with other communists in Minnesota who tell us that delegitimizing action and organizing is being done by individuals acting on the behalf of FRSO. DSA was also involved on this front. The hegemony held by FRSO makes this possible as their cadre members are involved in other orgs. There's another Somali group in Cedar Riverside who call themselves the Cedar Riverside Protection Alliance, but are Democrat adjacent and pro-assimilation. They were attempting to de-escalate by gathering all the African folks into their homes for that day, telling them to stand down and not confront Jack Lang. Jack Lang is a fascist agitator, basically. Cedar Riverside Protection Alliance was doing flyering, circulating statements via signal group chats, or boosting messages that were calling an org outside antagonists with no right to organize in Cedar. They cut off supply chains and disrupted organizing work doing this. When the fascists came to town, Jack Lang and company, the Coalition Against the Trump Agenda, a group made up of a lot of FRSO front orgs, enacted the strategy of shadowing the fascists. Basically, this amounted to them just following them around and yelling stuff at them. However, things did not play out as FRSO planned. Roughly 1,000 folks showed up. The divide between the masses and org affiliated was obvious. To counter around 10 fascists with a banner. The FRSO marshals protected the Nazi banner from the masses until they eventually lost control and the banner was destroyed in spite of their efforts. Extreme peace policing. An additional note to further illustrate the resource strangulation and white chauvinism of FRSO, a Somali organization that led the defense action against Jake Lang in Cedar Riverside, reached out to the SRA, Socialist Rifle Association of Minneapolis, for a firearms training. They later learned that there is a strong FRSO contingency in SRA. Once SRA realized Somali organization was the one that held the defense action, SRA informed the organization that they would not move forward since they created confusion and gave other FRSO organizations a hard time. From the comrade in Minneapolis, one thing I can speak to right now, not just in Minneapolis, but nationwide, we're seeing opportunism. There's this tailist need to use this term, quote unquote, general strike, to try and elicit buy-in from people. For these days of action, we saw this last Friday. The labor unions involved, the orgs involved. It was never called a general strike. It was clear we weren't calling for one. There were outside groups that decided to call it a general strike. When we mislead people into thinking a day of vacation is the same as general strike, we do an insurmountable amount of damage to education and getting working people to understand the actual risk reward of going on strike and dealing blows to capital, which is the point of a strike. That is the big criticism I have right now. The organizations that should and do know better continue to use words like general strike. PSL has pursued a similar strategy in Minneapolis. More than any other group, they have misrepresented the effort to organize petty bourgeoisie businesses to voluntarily close as a quote unquote general strike. They encourage people to use paid time off to participate in marches. This is the PSL strategy of class struggle, not as the struggle of the lowest elements of the proletariat against the imperialist system, but as the struggle of the petty bourgeoisie and labor aristocratic layers to achieve limited political aims. This is not revolution, this is counterinsurgency. The spontaneous development of the people is breaking free of the chains long cast over the struggle for liberation by the four opportunists. In every corner of U.S. empire, the grip of the opportunists, the tailists, is weaning. We must unite the most advanced theory with the most class-conscious elements of people, and we must fight against the settler socialism of the opportunist groups. What is this settler socialism? It is the Marxism of capitulation, a form of revisionism that sees reform as the only path forward and puts the question of revolution forever over the horizon. In FRSO and PSL, this is partially accomplished through the deceptive organizational structure in which access to internal documents and planning is entirely isolated and inaccessible. Day-to-day members of these organizations are encouraged to pay into them and attend marches, but the strategic and tactical level operates at one remove from the general membership. All decisions are made by a secret group of select few. Blankism, in other words, Blankyism, in other words. Have you seen calls for marches spring up with less than 24 to 48 hours notice? That's the work of the four opportunists. Whether it is their intention or not, the material result is the bleeding off of revolutionary energy into channels that are acceptable to the ruling class. In truth, it is an attempt to find accommodation with the ruling class and demand a different distribution of power within the imperialist system. It is the plea of the imperialist labor aristocracy and petty bourgeoisie who overwhelmingly command the four opportunists, for more spoils to be allocated to them and for a greater degree of input into the empire's political system. For more on the four opportunists and our criticisms, see generally, they reference one of their other articles. They basically are saying like they have articles on each of these different groups and why they're a bit problematic to what they're trying to do here. Okay, we and the organizers in Minnesota reject the settler bargain. The League principle: we require a countrywide organization to fight both the four opportunists and their labor aristocratic / petty bourgeoisie base and the bourgeoisie state itself. The lessons of Minneapolis are clear. It is possible to bring elements of the imperialist working class into direct and antagonistic contradiction with the state when we move our strategic goals out of the narrow realm of wage increases and into the realm of national liberation struggle. White anarchists and communists, petty bourgeoisie, and labor aristocratic elements have joined the national liberation struggle against ICE, breaking the law for the first time, acting directly against the state for the first time, opens a new world of revolutionary potential among the labor aristocracy. Show them that it is possible to oppose the state rather than seek accommodations with it. And we develop the subjective awareness of revolution. Revolutionary potential is created within otherwise reactionary elements of population. Yeah, excuse me. However, this is only possible with uncompromising proletarian leadership. Without the anchor of a revolutionary proletarian organization, opportunism is the unavoidable result. Those members of the imperial labor aristocracy and petty bourgeoisie who will not voluntarily surrender their class outlook and who will not voluntarily subject themselves to proletarian class leadership are our objective enemy. The principle of the League is the intermediary principle between our present stage of development, scattered, ideologically incoherent, with the presence of small pockets of developed communist organization at the local level, and a militant party form. Yes, we need a party of the new type, as the All Empire Workers League has put it. It's not enough, though, to just state the obvious that the U.S. in 2025 is not Russia in 1917. It is not China. It is not Vietnam. It is not a semi-feudal country or a country in the global periphery. The U.S. is the center of world capitalist reaction, an imperial hegemon that acts as the backstop and system of last defense for capitalism across the entire world. No metropolitan country has ever seen a successful proletarian revolution. We must create a vanguard organization of the working class that can purge all optimism and revisionism from its ranks, educate and elevate the working masses, defeat internal and external chauvinism, unite the liberation struggles of the colonies and semi-colonies, and prepare the reserves of the revolutionary proletariat for direct confrontation, for direct class war with the enemy state, with bourgeoisie, civil society, and with the world bourgeoisie themselves, who largely reside within the U.S.-Canadian bloc. In order to satisfy these requirements, we must creatively apply the lessons of 1905 of October of the course of struggle in China, Vietnam, Ghana, and the whole periphery. While we work to create this party, we must organize our various local organizations together and take advantage of the benefits that centralization can provide. While a league is not yet a party, it is an organization of organizations. We have discussed the formation of regional leagues in the Clarion in the past. It is through the process of regional organization that we can build our capacity to resist the state as well as the class forces that tend to drag communist orientation projects in the U.S. empire toward opportunism. Since 2025, the All Empire Workers League has worked to integrate local organizations and propagate, develop, and advance the theory necessary to combat the opportunists and the bourgeoisie imperialists. In areas with a high concentration of developed local organizations that are actually engaged in class struggle against the state, we urge them to band together to resist opportunism and form centralized organs of class power. In regions where the struggle has not yet heightened to the same degree as in Minneapolis, we urge local organizations to prepare for the same degree of struggle. Our sources on the ground warn that unless we prepare in advance, we will be caught off guard. Washington is willing to kill to suppress class consciousness and solidarity between the imperialist labor aristocracy and the U.S. proletariat. We have to be ready to counter that violence with the main weapon we have, organization. And I forget if I read the title, but just in case if I haven't, the title for that was Against Settler Socialism, Lessons from Minneapolis, on the Red Clarion website. I want to say it's like redclarion.org, maybe. I would have to double check that. But yeah, anyway. So I read this article to trying to do several things at once here again. I read this article because I think it is here we go. It is important for us to remember that, right? Election day is only one day of the year, right? What are we doing the other 364 days of the year? Are we producing candidates and organizations that we can support? Are we supporting those less fortunate in our community? Are we getting involved with mutual aid networks? Are we joining some organizations? Now, like, I think this article is good. I think, and I've been thinking a lot about this. Like, I think the difference is, kind of implementation. Although more and more, as we all get disillusioned with politics, politics is supposed to be like the avenue to vent our frustrations. Now, does that always work? Obviously not. But like, I feel like electoral politics voting is like the bare minimum, right? We need to be doing stuff during the quote unquote off season, right? Although it seems like here in America, it's election season like every season of the year, which is kind of insane. Again, thank you, unregulated campaign finance rules and whatnot. But yeah, what are we doing? We want to vote for candidates who represent us, right? Who are anti-colonial, anti-imperialist, pro-socialist, communist. And how do we get those candidates there? One, we encourage people to run, or we run ourselves, right? Doesn't matter, local, state, federal government, whatever. But then we also build up, organizations of funding, right? Like grassroots funding. And, I know there's, every politician has their issues, right? But it was almost a test case in certain ways of like Bernie Sanders, recent example of like, you can do campaigning where you rely on small donors, right? What was the thing he always talked about in a 2016 Democratic primary about his average donation was like $7. Doing things like this, building grassroots organizations, we talk about with voting all the time, driving people to the polls, showing up, being a poll watcher, even putting on social media, God forbid ICE or whatever shows up to a polling center, like getting that, just even like transparency, getting that stuff out in the public is vital. We're all limited people, but it's this working together, this idea of solidarity and organization that will overcome these larger structures in our society. And I think we're seeing some of it. No Kings just happened again last weekend. Unfortunately, I was working, couldn't attend that one. But that's just like the start. What are we doing? What are we doing beyond that? What are we doing to, whether it's like fighting Trump or protecting trans kids, like we're going to talk about in a minute here. What are we doing? Are we joining those organizations? Are we getting involved with like our local LGBT centers? Things like that, or local, NAACP. I know, like, obviously, as this article points out, there's some organizations that are better than others, right? I think it kind of depends. Just like politicians, just, whatever, like all people, all organizations aren't perfect. There's going to be things that, you know, you may not agree with or whatnot. But that's even more like why you need to be in those organizations, right? Like I've said this before, like I am a member of DSA. A lot of these criticisms are valid. My local chapter, um, I haven't had too many issues with. I've stuff they've done in stances that they've taken. I haven't necessarily disagreed with, but there is, especially when organizations like get bigger, right? There's different factions and stuff, and like we need to. Yeah, I guess this is why the democratic part is so important and why it actually matters, right? When we say democratic, is it just like, white, like middle class people such as myself, they're doing all the talking, right? Or is it everybody, right? Are we getting input from everyone? And obviously no political system is perfect either. There's issues with democracy, right? But I don't know. It seems to be the best option right now, and the option that like this country supposedly was built on, right? Yeah, well, democracy for rich white men, right? Black people slaves are only like 3/5 of a person type of thing. But there has been, the Constitution has been amended. It's not perfect. Like nothing's perfect. But I guess the bottom line is keep at it. I know we're all busy. That's like the whole point of capitalism, is to keep us at work and exhausted all the time. But there's small things you can do online, in real life, whatever, that we can do. Just find those opportunities, find that issue that you're passionate about, and like get involved. So yeah, okay. Enough of that. Let's move on to the news. All that was important. Keep it in mind as we go through the news. But let's get into some other stuff here. Okay, here we go. All right, we're going to start with some science news today. So Artemis 2 just blasted off. That was the newest project that NASA's doing, a moon land, I believe, moon landing project that they're doing. That blasted off. So they're out of orbit. It's going to take a while. I mean, like, the moon is relatively close to the Earth compared to all other like planets and stuff in space, but still, it's it's a bit of a distance. It's not a like a coast to coast drive from, like, say I'm in North Carolina to California. You would have to do that drive. And realize like this rockets go a lot faster than cars and stuff, but like distance wise, I think you would have to go from the East Coast to West Coast in this country like 4 or 5 times, something like that. My memory fails me here, but yeah, it's a long distance, so it's going to take a while. But anyway, it finally blasted off. They didn't have any issues, so they're traveling, which is cool. Hopefully, they'll find some cool like sciencey stuff. Let's see. There were 2 big social media cases, and I'm just putting this under science. Just for organization's sake, I guess. There's a big case in New Mexico and a big case in LA. I know we talked about the LA one a little bit, that we're suing these social media companies basically for the LA one was for like social media addiction. And then the New Mexico one was about like social media being harmful to children. And like gut reaction, everyone like, tech companies, Silicon Valley, social media companies, have just become so toxic for many reasons. And so there's a natural, I feel like we kind of all have this natural knee jerk reaction of like, oh yeah, stick it to big tech or whatever, which we should. I mean, this is why I talk about all the time. Antitrust law is so important. Break up these big companies. Also make the internet a public good, not a commodity, right? Something that is more decentralized, as the internet originally was, right? Internet 1.0. But instead of doing things like that, we have these lawsuits now where, like, on their face, it's like, yeah, I'm for child safety, and I'm for, I think social media is like plays way too much role in my life, for better or worse. So the gut reaction I get, and like that's what makes this. It is like this tech social media, like moral panic, basically is what we're seeing, and it's tough because it's like, okay, I think a lot of moral panics are like this in certain ways, right? Like, okay, there are real issues with social media. There are real issues with like ginormously large corporations, like essentially controlling the internet. But there's ways. There's much more effective ways to combat these issues than what a lot of politicians on both sides of the aisle are proposing. I know I've talked about her before. But Taylor Lorenz, she was a former, well, she still is a journalist. She's just like independent now. But she talks a lot about this. And this is one of those issues, right? Like, there's a lot of noise, but we need to stay diligent and like try to figure out ways. And there are ways, like there's all types of solutions out there, right? But there's like solutions that are definitely better than other solutions. So anyway, and there's a couple organizations, I'll have to look it up. They're really good, that focus on data privacy, stuff like that. I actually switched most of my stuff from Google, from Gmail, over to Proton. Proton is it's a nonprofit in Switzerland. It's basically like Google, but only like they encrypt all their data and they don't like share it and everything. It's a much more like safer platform in many ways, which again, like internet safety and security and hygiene is all wrapped up into this. Right. So there's a lot of things going on. It can get very confusing. I understand. Like I don't even understand all of it, but we need to look to people that are looking at it, that are actually sitting in on these cases and doing the real, like, on the ground reporting, So anyway, I talked about this LA case a while back. So this poor young woman was suing Meta and a bunch of other social media companies for basically social media addiction. Reading some of the court documents and stuff, it's just sadly, a lot of court cases are like this. It's just a really sad case of, as I read it, of this poor, individual basically retreating into social media and the internet because she was being abused in her house. She was being bullied at school. So it's just like, okay, it kind of makes sense. But anyway, this was kind of twisted. Her and I guess her mother and her family, which, not great dynamics there, to say the least, basically sued these social media companies because they're saying, oh no, all her problems were due to social media, even though, like, she never talked about social media, I guess, with her counselor. And this was only kind of a recent thing. I don't know. Again, I wasn't involved in the trial. I'm just an onlooker, So take everything I say with a grain of salt, do your own research. Anyway, this jury sided against Meta and these social media companies, and so she ended up winning. Again, it was in civil court, so the barrier for like winning or not or being found guilty is lower than it is in criminal court. So it's just kind of sad in that this is going to create precedent, and now we'll probably see a bunch of other people like start suing Meta and stuff for various reasons. Some of them probably legitimate, some of them not so legitimate. And it's just one of those things like you think, gut reaction is like, yeah, they're sticking it to social media companies, but like these lawsuits that these social media companies are losing are only a few $1 million. Like if you look at the whole, net worth of like Meta, Google, stuff like that, it's a drop in the bucket. And corporations do this all the time. Like it is more and this is how like fucked up it is, right? It's more cost effective, more quote unquote profitable to like settle in court with people or even lose these lawsuits, pay out a little bit of money relative to their like total worth, and continue to go on and consolidate and merge with other companies and grow bigger. So it's just like, and I get it, like we in America we have this complex, right, of like, yeah, David and Goliath, like always rooting for the underdog, the little guy, which is understandable. But we have to look deeper at these dynamics and what's actually happening. And so like Mark Zuckerberg will be in the courtroom looking all sad and whatever. But honestly, like in his mind, he's like, this is much better. Going through this is much better than actual like government regulating us, bringing antitrust, trust busting and stuff like that. The New Mexico case was also kind of weird because the state of New Mexico basically created these fake accounts, and the police do this all the time, in order to try to catch like child sex traffickers and stuff. They will create these fake accounts online, pose as like a 13-year-old girl or whatever when it turns out to be, like 50-something-year-old man who's a police officer, type of thing. And then they get the person to come meet them, and that's when they like arrest them. So New Mexico kind of did this on a large scale. They made a bunch of fake social media accounts, like basically 13-year-old girls, things like that. And they were trying to lure these people in. Well, there are two big issues with this. One, these officers were using actual pictures of children that they never consulted with. So these poor kids, their pictures are now out there for all these, child sexual abusers and stuff to find and be like, oh, and they weren't asked, they weren't even notified by the state of New Mexico. So one, that's already shady. And two, the other shady part is like, okay, so in most prosecutions, the cops will be like, pose as this 12-year-old girl or whatever online, lure the perpetrator in, and then they actually do a physical meeting, and then that's when they do like a controlled arrest, basically. Well, New Mexico didn't even go that far. New Mexico just like lured in these potential perpetrators and use that evidence as like, look, see, social media like attracts child sex traffickers and stuff. And it's just like, it's just like, okay, well, why didn't you finish the process and bring them in? No, it was all just honestly, it was all just like a political stunt. From my understanding, again, do your own research. It was all just kind of like a political stunt by the state of New Mexico to basically to create evidence that says, oh, look, Facebook, Twitter, whatever, you lure sexual predators, type of thing. You know, fuck we do anything about the actual predators or like the actual children whose rights were literally violated by these officers and prosecutors. No, it's all about fuck everyone else. We just want to take down these big social media companies, which is like, okay, yeah, everyone wants to, but like this is probably the most unethical way to do it. I don't know, so messy. But again, like this, again, having said all this, this is pretty usual pig behavior. So like again, like they will try to get you in any way possible, except that they're trying to build a case against Meta. Then you're a sexual predator. Oh, it's all right. You can go on and find someone else. I don't know. It's diabolical. Yeah. So anyway, New Mexico ended up winning that case. Again, I think it was a civil suit. So Meta now has to pay several $1 million to the state of New Mexico, and this is just further bolstering these states to like put in more age restrictions to ask for all of our licenses, just to use the internet. It's just disgusting. Like the issues are real. It's just like I feel like with a lot of Trump and MAGA voters, like the issues are real, right? Like the working class struggles are real, but there's very obvious like bad solutions to this, right? And they're just very prominent right now, and we need to keep fighting, for this, for like a freer internet with more privacy, fight to keep VPNs a thing, fight to keep, different nonprofits like the Tor network, stuff like that, available, because, this whole idea of like, oh, if you're not doing any criminal activity, you don't need to worry about it. Bullshit. That's exactly what the fucking cops do. They look for reasons to arrest people, right? They look for reasons. Hell, we all know, like, how cops are always just like, you may not have any weed, but they come up to your car and like, oh, I think I smell weed. I need to bring the drug dog out, ridiculous shit like that. Like that's their job. That's their literal job, is to try to get people in trouble, basically, whether they are or not, So again, we need to keep an eye on this. There are good developments happening, but a lot of the developments around like regulating tech, Silicon Valley, are just honestly like horrendous. When you again, and it's tricky because you like first reaction, you're like, oh yeah, this is good, but you need to like continue thinking down the line, right? Okay, so this happens. What will happen next? What will happen after that? Type of thing. But I'll keep an eye on it for you. SpaceX, which is Elon Musk's like mini NASA or whatever, they filed paperwork for their initial public offering. So they're currently a private company, but now they are looking to go public, be listed on the stock market. I saw something insane that this deal is like at least $1 trillion deal. That's trillion with a T. $1 trillion deal that involves like 13 different banks or something like that. So basically, whenever there's mergers, right, or public offerings or whatever, like these companies need to go to banks to get the money, right, to get the equity to do these things, right, to create enough shares to be put on the stock market or whatever. So at least $1 trillion. And then the other nice thing is, as if Elon Musk wasn't already rich enough, if SpaceX does get an IPO, which it probably will, unfortunately, it will make Elon Musk like a trillionaire. Again, that's T, trillion with a T. So, again, that's wonderful. also related, and I know some of this is not necessarily pure science per se, but it's like tech stuff kind of too. Okay, Oracle, another big tech company, is doing a bunch of layoffs, like 30% or 40% of their workforce, something like ridiculous like that. You know, businesses start losing profits. Where do they go first? They always go to labor. They always go to the working class, and they're just like, oh, sorry, you lost your job. That job doesn't exist anymore, so you can't even reapply, type of thing. Just discussing, greed, profits over people. It's what we're like trying to fight against, right? Okay, here's another one. Golden oyster mushrooms are kind of invading the U.S. now. So they were domestically cultivated, and sadly, what usually happens is when you have a lot of domestic cultivation, you have less and less like stringent controls on, not always, but oftentimes you get more people in it. They're practicing like less stringent controls, and then your plant or mushroom or whatever gets out, and then it grows all over, and literally chokes out all the other like natural fungi and stuff like that. So golden oyster mushrooms, I mean, they're small little things. They're like a yellowish gold, and then they usually grow in little clumps. Yeah, so that's wonderful. That another example of invasive species. Similar to this, so the pet trade, the pet market, right? Like if you want to get a dog or a cat or a parrot or whatever, the pet trade is always looking to like turn more animals into pets, which can be very problematic because there's a lot of animals that don't need to be domesticated or like are impossible to domesticate, right? Like people trying to freaking Tiger King, like have tigers and big cats. Yeah, I don't know. I don't understand it. Anyway, but there's a new thing happening. Apparently the ant trade is the new hot thing. I thought it was the hot thing a while ago when I was a kid, but apparently it's like the new hot thing. And so we've been seeing busts of people trying to smuggle in ant colonies, and again, there's like specific species that are endangered. Like there's millions of species of ants, and of course, it's usually the most endangered ones that people want. And so there's been a lot of big busts. I think like in Kenya, Ethiopia, Denmark, maybe. Of these ants, these like kind of rare African ants being smuggled out, and it's just again a lot of greed. Like, I mean, in my mind, I guess it's kind of one thing if you like catch them yourselves and you live in that area. That's not so bad. It's when you start transporting them other places, and again, just like the mushrooms, they can potentially become an invasive species. Ant farm, I will say I'm the first one. I love ant farms. I find ants and bees and stuff like that extremely fascinating. But there's like ethical ways to do this, right? There's ways that don't disrupt your local environment. And so we're probably going to just keep seeing more of this because I was reading some article. It's like a multi-billion-dollar industry now, this black market ant trade. So yeah, that's great. Okay, there's a company in I want to say Long Beach, California. I could be wrong. They're not the only company, but there's this whole idea of this asteroid capture. So there's these businesses, right, that they, send the rockets into space. Usually they're like little satellites that purposely go up to asteroids, temporarily land on them, and like mine minerals out of them, basically. It's just another form of extractivism and like, mining stuff. But instead of like further mining the Earth. The idea is that we can like temporarily capture an asteroid essentially, or land a little like a rover thing on it, and then it will collect minerals from the asteroid and then come back to Earth. I don't know. It's kind of interesting. There haven't, as far as I know, there haven't been any successful missions because it's hard. Like, you think about a small moving object trying to like essentially collide with or land on a big like asteroid, right? And asteroids aren't small, right? Like the small asteroids are like the size of a bus, type of thing. And those are the ones like that are really only have like enough resources to mine. So it's kind of a cool idea, but like also it's just like, oh, this extractivism, like we've wrecked the planet. Now we're going to go wreck the rest of space. Just, kind of irresponsible in a way. But the science behind it is pretty cool. Entertainment. So Megan Thee Stallion was taken to the hospital during one of her performances the other day, basically diagnosed with extreme exhaustion. I mean, she seems to be fully recovered. She's taking a few shows off, thank goodness. But it's one of those things, right? Of like, oh, we have all these actors and singers and stuff that are like, oh, I wish my life was like Megan Thee Stallion. No, you probably don't. Like, no, you don't. Like most people, I will say, probably don't want to be like a Tom Brady or like, well, now that he's retired, it's probably a little easier a little bit, but don't want to be a Tom Brady or like a big celebrity, because you literally like get no breaks. You always have to be on, right? Like on stage essentially. And yeah, I mean, the best of luck to her. That's kind of one of the downfalls of fame, right? It's just you constantly have to be performing, using energy, So, I mean, obviously some people, that's like what drives them. But I think a lot of people like living your life to that degree for such a long time is, I don't know. It's like there's a reason why like these pop stars and stuff only have a relatively short career. So yeah, okay. Here's another interesting one. So in Las Vegas, they have this I forget what it's called. It's something dome, but it's basically like a big dome, right? Like, and it's a movie theater essentially, but it's like one of those, those big IMAX theaters, like where you lay back your chair or whatever, and it goes on most of the ceiling. These domes are just like, or spheres are like a complete, like basically just about like 360 view of it. So apparently there's one in Las Vegas. I guess theater companies are investing more in these. I mean, that sounds kind of cool, honestly. Like, I love the IMAX stuff. Or honestly, it reminds me of like if you go to planetariums and you do the show, you go watch the showings of the planetariums where like they have the projections of all the stars on the wall. It's like similar to that, but on like a large scale. So that's kind of cool. Okay, let's move on to sport here. So the Democratic Republic of Congo makes it to the World Cup, first time in 52 years. So obviously huge celebrations there. It's a national holiday. That's like good for them. Unfortunately, the Democratic Republic of Congo does not have a lot of things going for it right now in terms of like people stealing all their resources and stuff like that. But, a win's a win, So another team that just made it into the World Cup is Bosnia. So good for them. The Ryder Cup, which is like a competition between countries, in like different golf tournaments, professional golf tournaments. So the U.S. team, they had at the PGA had asked Tiger Woods to captain that. Of course, he's still recovering from his most recent drunk driving vehicle rollover. So obviously, he said no to that. Okay, and last one here. Kind of sad, but not surprising. One of the first female NFL refs is now suing the NFL for wrongful termination. Basically, again, it's sad, but not surprising. She was in the league for like 3 seasons and then got fired for what the NFL claimed as like underperformance. And then she sued, and now all this stuff is coming out about like sex discrimination and just like nasty, hazing, based on her gender and sex and stuff like that. And so she's in court. I hope she wins. We need more diverse NFL refs. So and the stories she has of what she went through and what are going to be highlighted in this trial, like the little bit that I have read, it's just disgusting. Sadly, it is why I think a lot of women, and especially young girls, don't get into sports or aren't interested in sports because they're highly, again, it's getting better with women's leagues and stuff like that. But it's just very, very, patriarchal and masculinized. And obviously some sports are better than others. The NFL being one of the worst because they don't do, it's just only men still that can play, basically. And who knows when that will change. So, if you want to follow this, the former ref's name is Robin De Lorenzo. Best of luck to her. At the NFL, just one more reason why monopolies aren't good, because they can get away with this disgusting behavior, type of thing. All right. Now the news, world news, Middle East. Not surprising, Israel wants to partition southern Lebanon as a quote-unquote buffer zone. Essentially, all this means is they now want to colonize Lebanon. Again, I've said this before, Gaza and Palestine are just the starting point. Israel wants to expand and cover the entire Middle East. We see this with their continual bombings of Iran, their continual bombings with Lebanon. They're in peace negotiations, but as with every peace negotiation with Israel, one of the conditions will be, Netanyahu will be like, well, if you just give us the southern half of your country, we'll be okay. And then, of course, that happens. Hopefully it doesn't, but that happens. And then pretty soon, Israel's back and is just like, well, actually, we need a little more of Lebanon, and it's just Israel, another colonial state doesn't give a fuck about the sovereignty of anyone besides Israelis, basically. And it's sad, but to be expected. And this is why, Israel and colonial powers such as the U.S. are so disgusting, because there's never enough. There's always something more, right? There's always another person of color that we can make their life a little bit harder, we can steal more stuff from them somehow. Anyway, okay. So I've talked about before, Afghanistan and Pakistan are in a little bit of a conflict right now. Well, apparently they're now in peace talks, hosted in China. So hopefully something good comes out of that. Okay, this was again sad, but not too surprising. The UAE is limiting immigrants from Iran because, being in a war and being shit bombed out of you isn't enough to get you refugee status in the UAE. Again, it's just another example of how like fucked up the entire immigration system is in this world right now. Europe. So Russia has said that 40% of their oil exports have been shut down by Ukraine drones and drone bombings. Yeah, that's not gonna like raise gas prices even further. Like this just isn't another example of how like unsustainable and unpredictable fossil fuel energy is. So it's just more of this, more of the same. This is why pushing public transportation, pushing electric vehicles, green technology, stuff like that is so important, because there's just so many more liability. And I think most people have realized this at this point, that there's just so many liabilities to fossil fuels compared to like renewable energy. It's just like, why are we still hanging on? Well, mainly the petrodollar and U.S. colonialism and capitalism, basically. It's one of the big reasons why. Excuse me. Okay. Asia, there was a 7.4 earthquake in Indonesia earlier this week. I haven't seen a death toll or anything like that, but 7.4 is pretty significant. There was also I also read last night there was like a 4.6. It was around a 4.0 earthquake in part of California, I want to say. So yeah, the end times are here, whatever. So anyway, okay, South Africa, and I know I've mentioned this once or twice. South Africa deploys military to fight crime, so the boots are on the ground now. It was something like, so South Africa has like 9 provinces. I want to say it's like 7 or 9. But anyway, now like half or like over half of these provinces now have military occupation. So again, it doesn't just happen in Israel or the U.S. South Africa is another settler colonial nation, for as like equal and just as they are. Honestly, like South Africa is doing a lot better than a lot of other settler colonial nations, but still we see again, any fucking chance they get to send in the military, to send in the pigs, they will do, all under the guise of like, crime and death rates. And it's just like, okay, yeah, sure, no doubt there's high death rates in certain parts of South Africa, but why could that be? Is it because of the immigrants and the terrorists and the scary black people, or is it because the white people and people, the colonialists steal all the freaking wealth and resources from the native populations, and so their only resort is stealing, is committing crime? No, but it's always the scary, black and brown people that we have to send in the jackbooted thugs and strangle them or whatever. So again, it's every settler colonial nation. There are points where it's better, points where it's worse, but it's all the same thing. It's all the same, like cancer, basically. Okay, the Americas. So the U.S. lifts sanctions on Venezuela. So yeah, this is good for the oil companies, because now there's no legal restrictions now of them coming in and stealing, oil and resources from the Venezuelan people. This new government now, yeah, it's headed by like the Maduro's vice president who's like supposedly like head of a leftist party, but again, like, how left is it really? So that's wonderful. Solidarity, again, solidarity with all our neighbors across the Americas. We're in the same exact goddamn fight, Okay, here's another one. Speaking about jackbooted thugs and in Black and brown communities and minority communities. The FBI is now in Mexico, or not, sorry. Well, they probably are, but the FBI is in Cuba. Again, apparently they're investigating these boats. So there was this. It's really ridiculous. This was like a month ago. There was these people in like speedboats that went from Miami to Cuba and had like a bunch of AK-47s or something, and were like shooting at Cuba. Like very, very strange. So like, we're not sure if it was like Cuban exiles who were like coming back to like shoot up the motherland, or like what the hell was happening. But of course, any chance he can get, Trump jumps on it and says, "Oh no, we need the FBI in Cuba." All it is again like just extortion, occupation. The FBI is supposed to be the internal federal investigative force of the U.S. So why the fuck they're in Cuba or anywhere other than the U.S. is absolutely insane. But again, Trump and the U.S. they don't give a fuck. And again, this is our names on this, so we're just like, oh yeah, it's fine that we go invade every other country. Under like shady pretenses, or honestly under Trump, no pretenses, no explanations. So again, solidarity with Cuba Libre, right? Okay, actually there is my next one was on Mexico, actually. So Mexico now has a new foreign minister. So good luck to them trying to deal with Trump and this ridiculousness we have up north of the border. Okay, here's another one. So the U.S. loaned. So again, this is our tax dollars. $565 million worth of our tax dollars has been loaned to mining companies in Brazil. Yeah, if this wasn't obvious of like, oh yeah, we don't give a fuck about the rainforest or all the indigenous people or citizens of Brazil, we're now paying these mine companies to now steal more resources, mine more stuff. And on top of that, like, I'd have to double check, but my understanding is that so the U.S. Treasury wrote a loan to these mining companies, these Brazilian mining companies. So there's like a whole other level of like fuckery happening where like the U.S. is loaning them money, so like they have to pay it back with interest eventually. And it's like, oh, local companies or whatever, but it's like, local extractivist companies, right? So like most of these, I bet a lot of these profits won't even be seen by people in Brazil because they'll all go back to paying the U.S. back. So, again, it's just more exploitation. This is how like colonialism works, right? We've talked about it all the time. Okay, let's move on to U.S. news. So in Congress, the GOP leadership in the House, basically, so they have this DHS funding bill, right, going back and forth between the House and the Senate. Well, apparently in the Senate, they split the DHS funding up. So basically now this bill is like funds like 90%, roughly like 90% of the Department of Homeland Security, TSA, stuff like that. But it does not fund Border Patrol or ICE. And so the plan is that they'll pass this DHS funding, and then they'll get back to, fund in separate bills funding, ICE and Border Patrol. Basically, right, like the major top like Gestapo right now. Basically. I'm not necessarily like against this. I think a lot of the issues we have is that we have these huge omnibus bills that have like literally everything in there, and there's so much in there that like there's no way a congressperson or their staff can read through all of it and know exactly everything that's in there. So and this is how like we get fucked up shit happening, like military spending and things that like you wouldn't, and bills that you wouldn't expect to be in there at all. So on a legislative case, I kind of like this idea of splitting things up so we can get actual representatives voting directly on these issues, so we can say, hey, you representative, you Democratic representative, you literally voted to fund ICE. Like, fuck you, get out of office, type of thing. Where with larger omnibus bills, it's harder to keep track of all of it. But then the issue is, so the GOP, like the Senate basically did this, and now it's over at the House, and basically Mike Johnson, Speaker of the House, and top Republicans in the House are just like, okay, we'll follow this model. So it looks like we're going to get DHS funding passed here pretty soon, but no, it will not include ICE funding or Border Patrol funding. Which is kind of a win, but it's not, because the big beautiful bill, the big disgusting bill or whatever that was passed like the end of last year, basically like raised funding for ICE and like basically all federal law enforcement. So they're already getting money. There's already money there. Like for instance, Trump took some of that money that was like, this happens a lot in legislation too. Like there's these things called slush funds. So like Congress has to appropriate the money, right? They decide how much money is being spent on what. And so in bills and stuff, they'll have these slush funds where you will have like literally one line in the bill that says like, and we set aside, $32 million or whatever for necessary upgrades or whatever, which is like, what the fuck does necessary upgrades mean? They don't like ever define it. So anyway, they basically set aside this money that like can be used for just about anything. And so like, actually, this is how Trump used that money, this slush fund money, in the big beautiful bill to like pay TSA workers this week. Now the thing is with these slush funds, they're often usually limited and like only will last for a while. I mean, the TSA is a large organization, so like this, whatever it was, this 32 million or whatever, like at the current rate would only like fund TSA like paychecks for like another month or two, something like that. But anyway, so there was already funding for ICE and Border Patrol in the big beautiful bill. And then now Republicans are saying, oh, we'll do DHS funding for 90% DHS, but we'll do the ICE funding and the Border Patrol funding as part of the next budget bill. Well, why are they saying this? Why would they want this, right? Because all budgetary stuff, according to the rules of Congress, right, all budgetary stuff only requires a majority vote. And this is huge, right? So in the Senate, I've talked about what like the filibuster is and what cloture is and how you have to get 60 senators, so 2/3 of the Senate, to basically vote to end discussion and go on to vote. Well, this budget bill would drop that number down to 50 well, 51%, a majority. So now instead of 60 senators, it's going to take 51. The GOP has like 53 senators, something like that. So it basically makes the bar to passing it easier. So they're basically trying to get around Democratic votes and objections by doing this. So we'll see if this pays off. This is why like these budgets are so important. Like budgetary policy is like how policy is done in this country now, and it has been for several decades now. And this is why it matters so much. What you're spending your money on reflects a lot about who you are, what you value, what you want to pay for, what things you don't want to pay for. Same thing with individuals, same thing with governments, same things with nonprofits, businesses. Look at where the dollars go. Where the dollars go is signaling to you, what does this organization, what does this country value? The Big Beautiful Bill, for instance, was very clearly, we value law enforcement and we shit on the privileged or the less privileged. Like very obvious, like where did all this money, and I've talked about this before, where did all this money for like Border Patrol and ICE and stuff come from? It came from Medicaid cuts. It came from cuts to your health care. I don't know how to like get this through to people. Like it's all related, right? It's all related. We cut benefits for the poor so we can buy more, buy more ICE agents, right? Buy more AR-15s or M4s, I guess. M4 is like the military version of that. But yeah, it's all related. So we'll see. Hopefully this gets ICE out of the airports. Who knows? Knowing Trump, he'll probably come up with some other stupid reason why ICE still needs to be in the airports. Because he looks for anything to put ICE in more in our lives, which again is why we need to organize, why we need to stand up against this. Okay, speaking of Trump, let's move on to the White House. So Trump did a national address last night. To be clear, I did not watch it because it was more of the same. But anyway, so Trump again made a claim that the Iran war is nearing completion, but then that's one breath, and then the next breath is like, oh, but we need to send 2,000 more troops or whatever to Iran. Just we all know it's a farce. We all know it's a joke. We know it's just another war for oil, right? Iraq 2.0. And we need to stand against this, and we need to hold our representatives' feet to the fire. I don't care if it's Republican, Democrat, whatever. Flood their offices, like call them, send emails, say this is unacceptable. I'm a constituent, and this is unacceptable, type of thing. So again, this is why organizing matters, right? Because just you are one person calling a representative, but how many other thousands and thousands of people do your representatives represent in their district? This is why you need to band together with people, because the more people there are, the louder it gets and the harder it is to ignore. So anyway, a federal judge temporarily stops the ballroom construction in the White House. Oh, poor Trump. Poor Trump. Basically, the judge said that they didn't go through all the proper steps to get this ballroom approved and constructed. Again, it's all private money. It's like Raytheon and Lockheed and all these defense contractors. So that's a temporary block. We'll see. The judge didn't say it won't happen, but basically said that construction needs to stop until they go through all the processes, which will this actually stop Trump? I don't know. You know how Trump is. He's trying to undermine the judiciary and judges, just like every other institution in this country. But anyway, um, so Trump, little Donnie, cited an executive order, I think yesterday, 2 days ago, basically like limiting mail-in ballots or like something like, I don't know. There's so many different things like he's doing. It's hard to keep track of, which is like the point, right? But so he did some executive order on like mail-in ballots on like, oh, all like all local election officials have to have like, you have to have an ID with a ballot or something like that. Just again, complete, voter suppression, right? Because Trump knows he's going to lose big, as he always does in every election, right? But anyway, so the Democrats immediately sued him, which is good. Like, take this to court. Like a lot of these executive orders are one of those things where it's just like their legal standing is gray, and it's always been gray. It's like, so executive order is like the president basically writes a letter or whatever that says to different agencies like, oh no, you should do this, right? And it's not like it doesn't write law, but it is basically a directive to different branches, different agencies in the executive branch on how to like implement laws and stuff like that. So executive orders have always been on shaky ground, and every president, it doesn't matter, Republican, Democrat, whatever. Trump has used 10 times more executive orders than Obama used. Obama used like 10 times more executive orders than Bush used. Bush used like 100 times more executive orders than Reagan did. So yeah, they all use it. Like, I think executive orders are some of the easiest, right, to challenge in court, because they're not as well defined. But anyway, that's just constitutional technicality, right? That's me speaking legalese again. But yeah, so we'll see. Trump has moved the Forest Service headquarters to Utah. I wonder which district that is. That's getting all this money now from the federal government. Anyway, actually, I'm not necessarily opposed to moving agency headquarters out of DC. I think it's probably a good idea, potentially, especially since we're all on internet and stuff like that. So you can move information quickly from like Utah to DC and stuff like that. There are obvious issues of like, okay, who's going to be benefiting from these federal dollars? But anyway, the more concerning part to me was part of this. Trump is shutting down a lot of research sites of the Forest Service. So, again, just further attack on science, further attack on research, probably some stupid thing of like Trump's just like, they're doing DEI to the trees, doing DEI to the squirrels, some ridiculous shit, anyway. Okay, here we go. Trump is now taking a page out of Gavin Newsom's book. Again, Democrat, supposed leading candidate for president, Gavin Newsom, the homeless camp destroyer, Trump obviously couldn't be outdone, so now he's doing photo ops to clear DC homeless shelters, just like Gavin Newsom's doing photo ops of clearing homeless shelters in California. Again, both parties doing the exact same thing, Anyway. So Trump is, I guess this summer is hosting a international Antifa summit. So I guess security and intelligence leaders from around the world are supposed to come to the White House in like June or July to discuss Antifa and what they're going to do about it. Again, this is so stupid because Antifa is not a thing. It's like more of like a larger ideology, right? And yeah. But the bad news for us, this is going to basically Antifa to Trump is anybody that says anything bad about Trump. So like a lot of Republicans would technically be Antifa in his mind, right? But this is just more of like why we need to organize, why we need to be vigilant, because they are always looking for new ways to take away your rights, take away your freedoms, and it continues. Okay, I talked about the TSA funding already when I was talking about the big, beautiful bill. So there's another big executive order Trump had signed, I think, at the beginning of the week that basically says, like, federal contractors can't do DEI, whatever the fuck that means again. They don't define this shit. It's just another reason to be like, oh, no, we want our companies that we like profiting. We want Trump companies profiting off the federal government, not other companies, right? All right. A couple of Supreme Court updates, actually, big updates. So oral arguments were going on this past week. There was a decision that came down. So the big oral argument that happened yesterday was Trump v. Barbara, which is this whole birthright citizenship case of basically Trump trying to take away birthright citizenship, from people like, oh, only certain Americans are citizens, right? Not others. Completely ridiculous. Trump, in his usual mob intimidation techniques, actually sat in the front row of oral arguments. Surprise, surprise. Again, if this doesn't tell you like what he's most worried about, taking away your rights. Also, apparently, Robert De Niro showed up and kind of crashed the party and like was making fun of Trump, and so it wasn't all bad. The other potentially good thing, and I wouldn't put too much weight into this, but a lot of the justices on the Supreme Court were seemed very skeptical and questioning of the Solicitor General, who is the representative for the United States in all cases in the Supreme Court. They're very skeptical of the government's position, which is potentially good. It potentially signals, again, like, don't ever like make inferences of like how oral arguments go to how the actual opinions come out. But I guess if we're looking for wins, right, a lot of the justices, even the more like conservative Trump-appointed justices, seemed very skeptical of like the reasoning behind the government trying to take away birthright citizenship. So, I mean, we'll see. That decision, I think, is supposed to come out in like June or July. So we'll see. And it's just one more reason why we have to keep fighting for our rights for everybody, right? They take away citizenship from one person. They take away citizenship for all of us. Like, and we know this. This is why we organize. This is why we fight back. But just another reminder that Trump is always at this, and we always have to be at it, right? We always have to try to be like at least one step ahead, right? That's why organizing matters so much. Okay, so the one opinion that did come out was Chiles v. Salazar. Chiles was, I guess, this Christian therapist or something in Colorado. It's actually funny reading the opinion because like they don't really mention like all the very obvious Christian advertising and elements that this counselor was doing. But anyway, so the state of Colorado had passed a law, and 8 other states have similar laws on the books that basically ban essentially conversion therapy. And it's just part of like, so in order to get your license as a therapist, right, you have to be approved by, take the test and get approved by a state board, right, of counselors, psychologists to say like, okay, yeah, you meet all the qualifications. So anyway, these conversion therapy laws are basically written as board requirements, essentially. So the state is saying, okay, if you want to be a counselor in the state of Colorado, you have to meet these requirements, right? And one of them was like support, God forbid we do this, supporting your queer clients with their identity and their sexual orientation. And, God forbid, but yeah, literally, God forbid. Anyway, so the Supreme Court was just like, no. Like literally their reasoning was like, oh, Chiles uses talk therapy, right? Which is like, okay, what the fuck is talk therapy? You go from one counselor, talk therapy means one thing, to another counselor. Again, it's just like very vague already. But like literally, because it has the word talk in it, that means speech. And speech is protected under the First Amendment. So Colorado can't tell counselors what to talk about. Again, like obviously it's just very clearly misunderstanding like how counseling works, how psychological services work. Honestly, I think if more of the justices actually went to counseling, not only would it help them out in their lives more, maybe make them a little less angry and, mad and motivated to take away all our rights, they would probably learn like what talk therapy is, like how counseling and therapy actually works, and how people that hold themselves out as explicitly like Christian counselors are absolutely toxic, not just for queer people, but honestly for any people. Like, I don't care. Like, and I've gone to many counseling sessions, had many different like counselors, all of them really great. But anybody that like advertises their counseling or therapy services as like Christian, or like, I don't care, I'm Buddhist, but like even if somebody was like advertising as a Buddhist counselor or whatever, like automatically be skeptical, right? Because you go to therapy to talk with someone, a professional, talk through issues, not to be preached to. If I wanted to be preached to, I would go to church, or I would go to synagogue, or, at the Buddhist temple I'm currently in, they do some like preaching Dharma talks, but like, I like just the way my schedule is, I've never been to one, but anyway, like if I want that, I'll go to temple, right? I'll talk to a Buddhist monk or a priest or whatever, not a fucking counselor. And again, it's just like, these Supreme Court justices cannot get their mind around like other people in America have rights too, other than like white privilege. I don't know if this person was white, maybe not, but like privileged Christians, type of thing. And it's just one more reason why like Supreme Court popularity is going down, because they're so out of touch. They're so out of touch with ordinary Americans, right? They see trying to protect vulnerable people as taking away the rights of these poor Christians, right? Of these poor people that act out discrimination in the name of religion, right? Yeah, it's just disgusting. I think, a lot of Christians, hell, like one of the biggest people to write an amicus brief, like, so amicus brief is basically you're a party not involved with a lawsuit, but you have expertise on an issue that this court case is discussing. So like this huge counselor, she is like huge in the Catholic counseling world, right? Even she was like, no, this is stupid. Like we know through that she's done data, right, on like, no, like trying to like quote, and it's funny how they use this word conversion, right? It automatically gives the game away. But even she was like, no, like this is not only destructive to the individual, it's destructive to their family, it's destructive to their religious community. And there's no place for it in counseling. And again, like these justices on Supreme Court and like these Christian nationalists, they don't give a fuck. They want to see, they want to see Jesus in every aspect of their life, which like good for them, whatever. That's a life choice you want to do. That's great, but don't impose it on other people, So anyway, that's my little rant on that. Ninth Circuit limits this ICE injunction. So there's many lawsuits against ICE, but there was this lawsuit from these immigrants that were in these concentration camps. They sued ICE because, of course, ICE wasn't letting them see their lawyers. Shocker. And so anyway, they were able to get their case in in a lower federal district court. That said, yes, we're going to stop ICE from not letting you see your lawyers, but we're going to expand it to not just few people, but we're going to expand it nationwide. Basically, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals said like the injunction can stay, but only for the specific individuals in this case and can't be applied nationwide. So if you're not these few people, like 9 people or whatever, in this lawsuit, then ICE can stop your lawyers from talking to you or literally anybody. So that was kind of sad. Again, it didn't surprise me too much, kind of knowing how the legal system kind of works and stuff like that. So we'll see. Hopefully this case, hopefully this case works its way up. Although, with this Supreme Court right now, that's not much of a consolation. But anyway, some state news. So there was, again, ICE dumped, I think it was Border Patrol in this case, but essentially the same thing at this point. Border Patrol agents dumped a refugee outside of it's not funny, but it's just, it would be hilarious if the consequences weren't so serious, honestly. But anyway, so this refugee that Border Patrol had picked up, interrogated, and then figured out we don't have a reason to hold them. They dumped them in the front of a donut shop in Buffalo, New York. Again, Buffalo, New York. Very frigid temperatures right now. Of course, they just literally dumped them there with nothing. So, of course, they're going to fucking die of exposure. Well, thankfully, prosecutors have ruled this a homicide, so hopefully Border Patrol, somebody ends up in court. Because, this is absolutely ridiculous. And this just, again, shows you how much ICE and any law enforcement really cares about your health or safety. They don't give a fuck. They throw you out, tie you up, throw you out. They don't care if you die or not. And again, it's not just ICE, it's not just Border Patrol, it's your local police, it's the FBI, your state police, pigs are pigs, no matter what form they come in, right? Here's another sad one. The vice mayor of Coral Springs, it's a town in southern Florida, was found dead in her home. And her partner was arrested. Again, this is why domestic violence is such an important thing. Again, it doesn't matter who you are, what position you are, anybody can be subject to domestic violence. And domestic violence, you're more likely to be a victim of violence from someone like a family member or even an acquaintance or even, potentially a Tinder date, God forbid, something like that. But those are the people you need to fear the most. Now, I don't want to propagate fear, but be concerned about the most, right? That's why we've moved the language from stranger danger to sticky people. So people that like to hang around you, you're a kid, someone is insistent on giving you candy. Now, again, not every case, like doing good things, giving people candy isn't a crime, right? But like, there are certain things that predators and groomers and stuff, actual groomers, not trans people, but actual groomers and sexual, pedophiles and stuff like that do to groom their victims. And it's all part, it's like you're going to be a victim when you're most vulnerable, right? That's just like how crime works. So it's never like, very rarely is it stranger danger. Something like, according to FBI statistics, like 75 or 77% of all, violence that happens to people are done by like a family member or someone close to them or an acquaintance they met at the bar, something like that. Yeah. And again, it doesn't matter who. Another thing from Florida, again, this is no shocker, but so the governor's race is happening in Florida. I think DeSantis is running for re-election. I forget if he's term limited or not. Maybe not, because there's apparently several GOP candidates running in the primary. Anyway, one of these candidates, African American person, is facing racist attacks. Shocker. And it's just like, yeah, I don't know. Like, there's just something, and again, I'm not in that community, but I would say the same thing for queer people, right? Like, minorities in the Republican Party, like, I don't know. Like, you have to have so much like cognitive dissonance, right? Just like Tim Scott, one of the senators in South Carolina, a black man, but he's also a Republican senator. Like, I don't know. I don't understand it. And again, I'm not in the black or brown community, but coming from like the queer community and marginalized community, I just don't understand how that's possible. Because at least with queerness, you can like be in the closet about it, right? Like Mike Johnson, a lot of these Trump officials, like very clearly are, on their off time scrolling Grinder, but like more obvious thing, again, like race isn't a thing, but it's harder to like, it's harder to cover up your, like queer identity. Again, it depends on the person, I know, like, but it's kind of easier to cover that than like, your race or ethnicity. So it's just, I don't know. It confuses me. That's all I'm going to say. Okay. Another sad one. So there were three, I think it's a volunteer fire department in Dallas. Three of their firefighters are now in court charged with sexual assault of a volunteer. Yeah, that's fucking wonderful. So this female volunteer was like teenager. I was going to say probably like no more than 17. Volunteered for the fire department, like good for her, but then she was basically sexually assaulted by these three award-winning firefighters, and they're now in court, thank God. And this is just another example of any of these occupations where, and obviously there's a lot of women firefighters, and hashtag not all men or whatever, but like, it just seems like when you're in these highly like masculinized jobs, like firefighters, like the NFL, like certain blue collar jobs, like construction, those environments just like often tend to make it easier for abuse, discrimination, especially like sex discrimination to happen. So I'm sure this kid was just like, oh yeah, firefighters are cool. I've always thought about being a firefighter, and then to have this, yeah, it's just unacceptable. This person, the survivor, I wish the best for her. Don't give up like your dreams. Not all firefighters are like this. But again, you gotta be careful, I guess. Be aware of those sticky people, right? So this was kind of funny. So conservative world is kind of blowing up about that there were some photos leaked. Again, this is a clear privacy violation. Let me be clear on that. But apparently the who was it? The Telegraph or one of those disgusting British tabloid papers got photos of Kristi Noem's husband, who was in this group chat with, I guess, a couple, like 3 different women, none of them Kristi Noem, but anyway, he was basically in drag. He was like cross-dressing, I gave him private pictures, but yeah, so he was these pictures were leaked without his knowledge or permission, and now they're all over. And now conservatives are all like, even Trump has said something about this, which is just so stupid. But it's just like I don't know. As a queer person, it's like, so what? He cross dresses, like he does it on his own time. That's his own thing, That's between him and his wife, type of thing. Which it shouldn't be an issue, but again, we know how like homophobic this and like transphobic a lot of this country still is, unfortunately. Anyway. Elisa Slotkin was on Bill Maher. She's getting a lot of criticism from CARE, the big Muslim advocacy group, as she should be. I like just even entertaining the thought of being on Bill Maher is disgusting. Elisa Slotkin is one of the senators from Michigan, so I don't know, like bad move. But this is, again, why we can't trust Democrats, because they're like, oh, yeah, Bill Maher's a great guy, even though he's very clearly Islamophobic, transphobic, Anyway. Okay, almost done here. So some other things, mortgage rates jumped to 6.57%. So that's the highest it's been in since August, in several months. Hershey's is going back to the original recipe for Reese's. And again, good for the, I think it was the son of the owner, called Hershey's out, because again, companies do this all the time. They're trying to make a cheaper product so they get more profit. While this son was like, no, that's unacceptable. We're using the original recipe. Thank God, Hershey's decided that this was a good idea, and that their past idea was of switching it up was bad. So we're getting more authentic Reese's again, which is awesome. I love Reese's cups. So I guess the Treasury Department is getting a bunch of people from private equity in to talk about private equity. That what they should be talking about is how destructive and disgusting private equity is, and how we need more regulation around it and whatnot. But most likely what's going to happen is these professionals on private equity are going to come in and convince the Treasury Department to loosen the regulations and capital requirements around private equity, just making it more speculative and dangerous. But they're in talks, I guess. Just another thing, send an email to Treasury, send an email to your local representative saying how toxic private equity is, And last thing, so there were more mega deals, mega mergers in Q1. So from January 1 to now, that's roughly Q1. Than there has been in a long time, something like 122 mergers across the globe, equaling over $1 trillion. So again, this is what capitalism ultimately devolves into monopolies, oligarchies. This is why we need to stand up. Anybody, I don't care if they're a Democrat, Republican, anybody that's just like, oh yeah, capitalism's good. Bullshit. They are the problem, and we need to organize and fight against this. So anyway, all right, last thing, and we already talked about it before, organize. Yeah, and that's it. I will see you tomorrow. Peace.